8. In the tranquil streets of suburban Seattle, Washington, where vibrant red maple trees blaze every autumn, Elizabeth Thompson devoted her entire life to building a home. Born and raised in a small coastal town where the ocean whispered tales of resilience, she met Henry Thompson at 18, a young man brimming with passion and dreams of real estate success. They fell deeply in love, and within 2 years they married in a simple ceremony by Lake Washington. It was 1967 when the world was shifting, but for Elizabeth, life revolved solely around Henry and their shared dreams. They moved to a modest suburban house where Henry began to build his career. Once an elementary school teacher, Elizabeth gave up her job to care for their family. She told Henry, "I'll be your foundation," her eyes sparkling with faith, and so she was. While Henry hustled through real estate deals, Elizabeth turned their house into a haven. She planted roses in the front yard, cooked warm meals with the aroma of coffee wafting through each morning. She sacrificed sleep to stay up late when Henry was stressed, listening to his tales of triumphs and failures. "We're a team," Henry would say, wrapping her in his arms. "Without you, I'm nothing." Then Michael was born on a rainy afternoon in 1975, their greatest joy. Elizabeth poured her heart into raising him, teaching him to read from Grimm's fairy tales, playing baseball in the backyard, and sharing stories of his brave fisherman grandfather. She gave up dream vacations and gatherings with friends to ensure Michael's childhood was perfect. As Henry's real estate company grew, bringing in substantial investments, Elizabeth worked quietly behind the scenes, managing family finances and saving every penny for Michael's future. She once declined an offer to return to teaching because "Michael needs me at home." Her silent sacrifices went unspoken. She smiled watching her son grow. But life isn't always fair. In 2005, Henry died suddenly of a heart attack in his office. Elizabeth vividly recalled that fateful night she was at a friend's house, while Henry called Michael, then 30, and working at his father's company, to discuss a large debt from a bad investment. Michael later said he couldn't make it in time, but something about his story felt off to Elizabeth. Henry's death left her with a sizable inheritance, the house savings and company shares. The grief was unbearable. She spent long nights crying alone, clutching her pillow, haunted by the scent of Henry's tobacco. "Henry, you've left me," she whispered in the dark, her heart shattered. Michael, now the family's pillar, promised to care for her. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle everything," he said at the funeral, his voice firm but eyes averted. At first things seemed fine. Michael took over the company, but gradually he changed. His visits grew rare, his calls centered on money. Elizabeth saw her son drowning in debt from risky decisions, echoing Henry's warnings. She tried to counsel him, "Michael, be careful, don't lose what your father built," but he brushed her off. "You don't understand business, Mom." Those words, cut like a knife for her sacrifices, gave him his start. The lonely years stretched on. Elizabeth lived alone in a house filled with memories. She tended her flowers, read Steinbeck, and played the piano every Sunday, honoring Henry. She missed the afternoons when young Michael ran about, now just distant memories. Michael's occasional visits were rushed, his eyes glued to his phone. He'd say, "I'm busy, Mom," but she knew it was indifference. She had given everything, yet received isolation in return. Her heart ached, tears falling in the quiet nights as she wondered if her love was enough to hold her family together. Then disaster struck. One morning, Elizabeth slipped on a rug in the living room. It was a minor bruise, she was still sharp and mobile, but Michael seized the moment. He appeared early the next day with a briefcase in his hand and a cold face. "Mom, I found a good nursing home. It's time." Elizabeth laughed, thinking it a joke, but his unyielding gaze silenced her. "I'm not kidding. It's too dangerous for you to live alone." She resisted. "I'm fine. This is my home." But Michael had arranged everything. Her belongings packed, papers signed. She watched strangers carry her boxes, her chest tightening, breath shallow. The family drama erupted. Elizabeth shouted, "Michael, what are you doing?" "I gave my life for you," he replied coldly. "This is for everyone's good. I don't have time to keep looking after you." His words were a dagger tearing her heart. She recalled sleepless nights by his sickbed, selling jewelry to pay his tuition. Now her son saw her as a burden to discard. They took her away in a van, not Michael's car. She sat in silence, tears streaming, watching her home fade. Evergreen appeared clean but sterile, reeking of disinfectant and loneliness. Elizabeth sat on her new bed, her name taped to the door like a label. Michael said, "I'll visit soon," and left without a hug. She didn't cry, immediately sitting still as memories flooded Henry young Michael, her quiet sacrifices. She wasn't a burden. She still had life in her. That night, a spark of defiance ignited. "They think I'm done," she whispered, "but they're wrong." The faint morning light slipped through the living room curtains where Elizabeth Thompson once felt safe. The Seattle suburban home was now just a memory replaced by the cold white walls of Evergreen Nursing Home. The fall on the rug that day left not only a bruise on her arm, but marked the collapse of her last shred of trust in her only son, Michael. Elizabeth, her silver hair neatly combed, sat on the edge of her new bed, trembling hands clutching a thin blanket. She didn't cry, but her heart felt crushed by the harsh truth the person she loved most had betrayed her. That day began like any other. Elizabeth woke early brewing coffee in the kitchen, still tinged with the scent of old wood from Henry's days. She strolled through the house, fingers tracing family photos on the wooden shelf, Michael in his baseball uniform beaming beside Henry on their first fishing trip. She smiled, but the smile vanished when the doorbell rang. Michael stood there not with a son's concern, but with the rigidity of someone on a mission. Dressed in a black suit, briefcase in hand, his eyes avoided hers. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice flat, like reading a script. The air in the room grew heavy. Elizabeth invited him in, trying to stay calm, but a bad feeling made her heart race. Michael didn't sit or ask about her health after the fall. Instead, he opened his briefcase, pulled a stack of documents, and placed them on the table. "Mom, I've found a better place for you. Evergreen Nursing Home. Very modern, very safe." Elizabeth was stunned, as if the ground had given way. She laughed, thinking it was a joke, but the laughter died when she saw Michael's cold stare. "I'm not joking. You fell. You live alone. It's too dangerous. I can't let you stay here." She tried to protest, her voice trembling but firm. "Michael, I'm fine. I don't need to go anywhere. This is my home, where your father and I built our life." But Michael didn't listen. He cut her off, his tone. "Icy, Mom, I've decided. Everything's arranged. The van will be here in an hour." Elizabeth felt her blood freeze. She looked at her son, searching for a trace of the boy who clung to her during storms, but saw only a stranger consumed by ambition and selfishness. Less than an hour later, two strangers in uniforms arrived, packing her belongings. They moved quickly and passively, as if clearing an abandoned house. Elizabeth stood in the hallway, watching boxes containing her life being carried away. The piano where she played Clair de Lune for Henry, the books she read to Michael, all packed away as if meaningless. "Michael, please," she whispered, tears welling, "don't do this to me." But he only said, "This is for your own good, Mom. You'll see." His words stabbed deep, not for their cruelty, but for their indifference. They took her in a van, not Michael's car. Elizabeth sat in the back, staring out the window as her home faded. The rose bushes she tended for years became a blurry streak. The engine hummed steadily, but her heart held a deadly silence. She remembered Henry holding her hand while driving through these roads. Now she was alone, thrust into a strange place by her son. Evergreen loomed ahead with stark white walls and large windows, but no warmth. The smell of disinfectant mixed with what she could only describe as abandonment. Her room at Evergreen was small, tidy, but alien. A small sign on the door bore her name as if she were a categorized item. Michael made one final appearance, setting down a few items: an old photo of himself, one of Henry holding baby Michael, and a poorly cropped picture of her from a family photo. He said, "I'll be back soon," avoiding her gaze, then turned and left. No hug, no words of love. The door closed, leaving Elizabeth in suffocating silence. She sat on the bed's edge, clutching the photo frame, her heart aching. She had given her life for Michael, yet he saw her as a problem to solve. That night, Elizabeth lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights in the hallway. She thought of Henry, their promises to grow old together, always to protect each other. Now Henry was gone, and Michael had betrayed her. But in the darkness, a small spark flickered in her heart, not anger, not sadness, but quiet resolve. They thought she was finished, but she knew she still had strength. Elizabeth closed her eyes, her breathing steadying. "This isn't the end," she whispered to herself. A new battle had begun, and she wouldn't let herself be erased so easily. The early days at Evergreen Nursing Home passed like a sluggish dream where time seemed trapped within cold white walls. Elizabeth Thompson, once the heart of a warm Seattle suburban family, now found herself imprisoned in a strange world. Her small room with a single bed and a window facing a steel fence offered no comfort. The faint sunlight filtered through the curtains each morning, but it couldn't dispel the chill in her heart. Elizabeth, her silver hair neatly tied, sat in an armchair by the window, her sad eyes gazing at a small yard where sparrows hopped on the grass. But they couldn't make her forget the truth her son Michael had cast her into this place. The wheels of the medicine cart echoed in the hallway every morning, a reminder that she was no longer free. With forced smiles and averted eyes, the staff treated her as part of a routine, nothing more. They called her Mrs. Thompson in polite but distant tones, as if her name were merely a label on her door. Elizabeth tried to engage them, sharing stories of baking apple pies for neighbors or playing the piano for Henry on winter evenings. But they only nodded, then hurried away, leaving her with oppressive silence. She realized that here she was no longer Elizabeth, the woman who was the soul of her home, but just a patient, a fall risk to be managed. Meals were served on schedule, but they lacked the taste of home. The bland scrambled eggs and watery coffee couldn't compare to the aroma of Henry's morning brew. Elizabeth ate silently in a corner of the communal dining room where others around her seemed lost in their own worlds. Some elderly residents stared blankly at a TV playing outdated game shows, while others dozed their juice cups untouched. Elizabeth felt invisible, as if her existence had been erased overnight. She missed her home, the birdsong in her garden, and the scent of blooming roses. But most of all, she missed feeling loved, needed. Michael didn't appear in the first week. Her phone on the bedside table sat silent like a useless ornament. She stared at it, hoping for a call, a message, or a brief check-in. But nothing came. One afternoon, as pale sunlight streamed through the window, she held the photo of young Michael he had left behind. The boy in the picture smiled brightly, eyes full of joy. Elizabeth traced the frame, her heart aching. "You were once my everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. But that boy was replaced by a cold man who saw her as a burden to discard. At night, evergreens sank into an eerie stillness. The hum of fluorescent lights in the hallway played like a mournful tune without end. Elizabeth lay in bed, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling, trying to summon Henry's image. She recalled how he held her hand and laughed when she burned her first batch of cookies. But those memories were now overshadowed by Michael's betrayal. She thought of the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights caring for her son, and the opportunities she had declined to ensure Michael grew up in love. What did I do wrong, she asked herself, silent tears falling. Deep down, she knew the answer. It wasn't her fault, but Michael had chosen a path with no room for his mother. In that loneliness, a small spark emerged. Elizabeth realized she couldn't sink into despair. She still had a sharp mind, precious memories, and most importantly, the strength to fight. Each morning, she forced herself to rise, dressing carefully as a declaration that she was still. She began observing her surroundings, noting details, the staff's whispers, the shift in their eyes when her name was mentioned. She knew she was being watched, but she also knew they underestimated her resolve. One evening, as pale moonlight shone through the window, Elizabeth sat at her small table, penning lines in an old notebook. She wrote of Henry, happy days, and her current pain. "They think I'm done." She wrote, her handwriting shaky but resolute, "But I'll show them who I am." It wasn't anger, but a promise to herself. Elizabeth closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She didn't know the future, but knew she wouldn't let Michael or anyone else dictate her story. She felt a small flame burning in the darkness, ready to flare when the time came. The days at Evergreen Nursing Home dragged on like a wordless elegy, each note carrying the chill of isolation. Once the heart of a warm Seattle home, Elizabeth Thompson was now just a name on a door label. The faint light from the window illuminated her face, where wrinkles told the story of a life of sacrifice. But in her eyes, though, weary, a spark of resilience flickered, never extinguished. She knew she couldn't let Michael's betrayal define her fate. Then a woman entered her life on a rainy afternoon, bringing hope she hadn't anticipated. It was Sophia Carter, a young nurse with dark hair tied high and tired but warm eyes. She entered Elizabeth's room with a clipboard in hand, but carried no aloofness, unlike other staff. "Hello," Mrs. Thompson said softly. "I'm Sophia. I'll be caring for you this week. Is there anything you'd like me to know?" The simple, sincere question stunned Elizabeth. How long had it been since anyone asked her that? Since no one cared who she was beyond patient in room 204. She looked at Sophia, searching for a hint of pretense, but found only genuineness. Elizabeth said, "I like making apple pie," her voice trembling as if testing herself. "I used to play the piano for my husband Henry every Sunday evening, and I still remember the smell of his Old Spice aftershave." Sophia smiled, not the polite smile of a staff member, but a real one that lit up the room. Apple pie. "That sounds wonderful. Got any special tricks?" The question opened a door Elizabeth thought was sealed shut. They began talking not just about pie, but about the small things that made her who she was. The Steinbeck books she reread the mornings singing with young Michael, and the pain of Henry's loss. Sophia didn't just listen, she shared her own stories. She spoke of Lily, her 6-year-old daughter, with a radiant smile who loved peanut butter sandwiches and feared the dark. She opened up about her mother struck with early onset Alzheimer's and how she worked night shifts to cover medical bills. "My husband left when I said I wouldn't put Mom in a home." Sophia said, her voice calm, but her eyes betraying a wound. "He said he didn't want to carry that burden." Elizabeth's heart tightened. She saw in Sophia a familiar pain, sacrificing everything for family, only to face loneliness. Sophia became the sole bright spot in Evergreen's gray world in the following days. She visited Elizabeth daily, even if just for a moment, bringing a warm tea from the staff room or asking, "How's your day, Mrs. Thompson?" She called her Elizabeth instead of Mrs. Thompson, a small detail that made her feel human, not a medical file. Once Sophia brought an old Fleetwood Mac record recalling Elizabeth's mention of loving them. As Landslide played, Elizabeth closed her eyes, tears streaming. She remembered slow dances with Henry, but the pain softened with Sophia's presence this time. Sophia wasn't just a nurse. She was someone who saw Elizabeth truly saw her. She didn't pity her, but respected her as if her stories mattered. One afternoon, as they sat by the window watching the rain, Sophia shared that Lily had a fever the previous night. "I stayed up all night to ensure she was okay," she said, her slender hands gripping a coffee cup. Elizabeth looked at her, seeing herself 30 years ago holding Michael through fevers, sacrificing sleep for his safety. But unlike her, Sophia had no one to lean on, no husband, no family, just a little girl and a mother slipping away from the world. In that moment, a new feeling stirred in Elizabeth: gratitude and a deep connection. Sophia wasn't just a caregiver, she was someone Elizabeth wanted to protect, as she once protected Michael. That night, Elizabeth pulled out her small notebook in the dim glow of her bedside lamp. She wrote Sophia, "She's not just a nurse, she's the light in my darkness, and I'll do something so she doesn't suffer like I did." She closed the notebook, her heart pounding with a new resolve. She wouldn't let Sophia, who gave her a reason to feel alive again, face her struggles alone. In Evergreen's isolation, Elizabeth felt a new purpose, a reason to keep fighting. Elizabeth Thompson found a glimmer of hope in Sophia Carter's presence in the stifling days at Evergreen Nursing Home. The small room with white walls and the smell of disinfectant was no longer a prison for her soul when Sophia entered. She brought care and a connection each day, as if pulling Elizabeth back to herself. As their bond deepened, Elizabeth saw that Sophia wasn't just her light, but a woman carrying burdens as heavy as her own once were. This realization drove Elizabeth to decide to change her life forever. Every morning, Sophia appeared with a tired but genuine smile, her slender hands pushing the medicine cart down the hallway. Elizabeth noticed she worked harder than anyone at Evergreen. She stayed late, checking on patients, cleaning corners others ignored. Once, Elizabeth saw Sophia sneak a cookie from the dining hall for an older woman who could not come to dinner. "She loves cookies more than anything," Sophia whispered, her eyes twinkling with care. Elizabeth smiled, but her heart grew heavy. She knew this small act wasn't just kindness, it was the mark of someone who always put others first. One afternoon, as faint sunlight streamed through Elizabeth's window, Sophia sat beside her, cradling a cold coffee. She spoke of Lily, her young daughter who had drawn a picture of her mother and grandmother at school. "She wants me to hang it on the wall, but I haven't had time," Sophia said, her voice tinged with sadness. Elizabeth asked, "Do you ever rest, Sophia?" She shook her head, smiling faintly. "When Lily's grown, I'll rest. Right now, she and my mom need me." Those words cut through Elizabeth like a blade. She remembered her years of sacrifice for Michael, the sleepless nights, the dreams set aside. But unlike her, Sophia had no one to rely on, no husband, no family, just double shifts and a heart that kept giving. Elizabeth began noticing small details about Sophia, her worn shoes from endless walking, the way she hid exhaustion behind a smile, the fleeting sadness in her eyes when mentioning her mother, who no longer recognized her. Once, as they sat in the small garden behind the facility, Sophia shared that she had moved her mother into her apartment because she couldn't afford a nursing home. "I couldn't leave her in a place like this," she said, her voice trembling. "Not because it's bad, but because I want her to feel loved." Elizabeth looked at her heart aching. She saw herself in Sophia, a woman who gave everything yet no one acknowledged or protected her. That night, in the dim light of her room, Elizabeth couldn't sleep. She thought of Michael, how he betrayed her, casting her into this place like discarded baggage. Then she thought of Sophia, who made her feel seen and valued. A powerful idea struck her: she couldn't let Sophia struggle alone. She had lost Michael, but she could create a new family, built not on blood, but on loyalty and love. Elizabeth opened her small notebook and wrote, "Sophia deserves to be loved. I'll give her what Michael never cherished." The next morning, Elizabeth asked Sophia to find the phone number of her family's old lawyer, Robert Hayes. Surprised but unquestioning, Sophia quietly brought a phone and found a private corner for the call. When Robert's voice came through, Elizabeth didn't hesitate. "I want to change my will, Robert. Half my estate, the house savings shares, will go to Sophia Carter. And I want to start the process for adult adoption." Robert paused, then asked, "Are you sure, Elizabeth?" She replied, her voice firm. "I've never been more certain." Elizabeth kept this decision from Sophia, wanting it to be a gift revealed at the right time. But inside, she felt liberated. She thought she was doing something meaningful for the first time since Henry's death. She wrote a letter to Sophia, tucked it in her drawer, filled with heartfelt words. "You're not just my nurse, Sophia. You've given me back the meaning of family." Each day after, as they talked about small things from cookie recipes to Lily's dreams, Elizabeth's heart felt lighter. She was no longer a shadow, but a woman with a new purpose: to protect the one who protected her and to build a legacy rooted in love, not betrayal. In the dim glow of Evergreen Nursing Home, Elizabeth Thompson began to rediscover life's meaning through Sophia Carter, the nurse who became her light in dark days. But just as she thought she could build a new family, a sinister truth emerged, threatening to shatter everything. Michael's betrayal, the son who was once her world, didn't end with casting her into the nursing home. A colder, deeper scheme was woven in the shadows, and Elizabeth's accidental discovery of it broke her heart once more. The days at Evergreen grew less oppressive with Sophia's presence. Elizabeth found joy in small moments: a cup of chamomile tea, Sophia brought a story about Lily, or the warm smile greeting her each day. Yet Michael's betrayal lingered, a quiet ache. He didn't call or visit, leaving her silent like a sentence. She tried not to dwell on him, but as the hallway's fluorescent lights hummed each night, memories of young Michael in her arms clashed painfully with the cold man he had become. One late night past midnight, Elizabeth awoke to hushed voices in the hallway. Evergreen was usually silent as a graveyard at this hour, with only the soft steps of night staff. But tonight was different. She draped a thin shawl over her shoulders and quietly cracked open her door. The faint yellow light from the hallway revealed two men near the administrator's office. One was Michael, tense hands clenched. The other, in a gray suit, was unfamiliar, but Michael's sharp voice chilled her. "If Mom changes the will, I'll lose everything," he said, low but cutting. "Do something, prove she's not in her right mind." Elizabeth held her breath, retreating into the shadows, her heart pounding. The other man replied evenly, "It's her legal right, Michael. You can't stop her." Michael snapped, his voice seething. "I want a psychological evaluation, something official. If she's declared incompetent, the will won't stand." Elizabeth's blood ran cold. She heard Michael continue. "She's being manipulated by that nurse, Sophia something. I won't let her steal my inheritance." The word "my" hit like a hammer, crushing any lingering hope that Michael still cared. She closed the door softly, unnoticed, and sat trembling on the bed's edge. Michael didn't just want to control the estate. He tried to erase her will, to reduce her to a puppet. But what hurt most was a memory that surged back, sharp and terrifying. The year Henry died, she asked Michael if he had spoken to his father that day. He said no, but his evasive eyes and rushed arrival at the hospital with dry eyes now stood out starkly. Elizabeth clutched her chest, her breathing ragged. Had Michael deliberately ignored Henry's call, letting his father die to hide the company debt he caused? The thought was a dagger slicing through her heart. The next morning, Elizabeth forced herself to stay calm. Michael appeared carrying a box of herbal tea she hadn't requested. He smiled thinly, asking, "You okay, Mom?" as if his cruel words hadn't echoed the night before. Elizabeth nodded, pretending ignorance, but her eyes were sharp, memorizing every detail. She knew confronting him now would only hasten his plan. She needed time allies. After he left, she sought out Hana, a young aide at the front desk. "Did you see my son last night?" she asked, her voice low but firm. Hana hesitated, then nodded. He was in the administrator's office, arguing about some paperwork. Elizabeth didn't press Hana further, but the confirmation solidified her instincts. Back in her room, she pulled out her notebook from the drawer, adding a line Michael betrayed not just me, but maybe Henry too. "I won't let him win." She thought of Sophia, her sacrifices, and the will she had changed. She knew Michael wouldn't stop and needed to act before he reduced her to a forgotten name. Elizabeth closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. In Evergreen's silence, she sensed a battle approaching. This time, she wasn't fighting just for herself, but for Sophia, Lily, and Henry's legacy, something Michael was never worthy of. Elizabeth Thompson found a spark of light through Sophia Carter in the dark days at Evergreen Nursing Home, but a colder scheme now threatened that light. After overhearing Michael's plan to strip her of her autonomy, Elizabeth knew her time was running out. Her son's betrayal didn't end with placing her in the nursing home. It had escalated into a war to erase her will and dignity. Then that scheme became reality, on a dreary morning, thrusting Elizabeth into a new spiral of isolation and despair. That morning, rain pattered softly against the window, blurring the garden view Elizabeth often turned to for solace. She was at her small table writing in her notebook when the door swung open. A new nurse with a blank face and monotone voice entered. "Mrs. Thompson, we need to transfer you to another area for observation," she said, avoiding eye contact. Elizabeth's heart raced. "Observation for what?" The nurse dodged the question, saying, "Only doctor's orders for your safety." The word safety rang like a mockery, making Elizabeth's blood boil. She tried to stay calm, pressing further. "Who ordered this? I need details." The nurse hesitated, then admitted, "Your son, Mr. Walsh, and Dr. Levin." Michael's name was a knife confirming her worst fears. They weren't moving her to another room in the facility, but to the psychiatric ward, a secluded place with coded doors and a heavy prison-like atmosphere. Two orderlies arrived with a wheelchair, citing protocol. Elizabeth straightened, her voice firm. "I can walk." But they insisted, and she was forced to sit, feeling like a prisoner being escorted. The psychiatric ward's hallway was long and cold, with pale green walls. No pictures, no sound, only footsteps and the click of a locked door behind her. The new room was smaller, with a bolted-down bed and a safety glass window that wouldn't open. No phone, no Sophia, just stifling silence. Elizabeth stood in the center, clutching her shawl, struggling to contain the anger burning in her chest. They wanted her gone, not just from Michael's life, but from control over her own legacy. The first night in the ward was an endless nightmare. Light from the hallway seeped through the door's gap, illuminating the ceiling, like a reminder of her surveillance. Another nurse, with weary eyes and a tight bun, brought a white pill for rest. She said, her tone gentle but commanding. Elizabeth eyed the pill and pushed the tray away. "I don't need it," she said sharply. The nurse frowned, jotting something on her chart, the word non-compliant flashing in Elizabeth's mind. She knew each refusal counted against her, but she couldn't let them dull her resolve. Sitting on the bed's edge, she thought of Henry's final moments. She recalled the call Michael claimed he never got, but now she doubted him. Had Michael deliberately let his father die to avoid responsibility for the company's debt? The thought made her tremble, not from fear, but from the painful truth the son she loved was now willing to destroy her for his own gain. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from weakness, but from mourning the love she'd poured into him only to receive betrayal. In that isolation, Sophia's image emerged like a small flame. Elizabeth remembered her smile, how she listened to stories of the old days, and how she brought chamomile tea just because she knew Elizabeth liked it. Sophia wasn't just a nurse. She was the only one at Evergreen who saw her as a person, not a file. Elizabeth clenched her fists, whispering, "Sophia, I know you won't abandon me." That fragile hope kept her sharp. She couldn't reach Sophia, but she believed Sophia would sense something was wrong and find a way to help. Elizabeth began counting the days, noting every detail, the staff's schedules, scribbled notes, and evasive glances when she asked about Sophia. She knew that anger or resistance would be used to bolster Michael's lies. So she stayed calm, answering questions evenly, but her eyes never wavered. Each night on the hard bed, staring at the ceiling, she planned. She didn't know how to escape, but knew one thing: she wouldn't let Michael win. Not this time. In the darkness, she whispered to herself, "I'm still here, and I will fight." In the suffocating darkness of Evergreen Nursing Home's psychiatric ward, Elizabeth Thompson was trapped. No phone, no freedom, no Sophia Carter, her sole light. But outside the spark Elizabeth had kindled in Sophia's heart still burned. Unaware of Michael's scheme, Sophia sensed something was wrong when Elizabeth vanished from her usual room. With a mother's heart and a warrior's resolve, Sophia embarked on a quest for truth to save Elizabeth and protect what they were building, a new family rooted not in blood, but in loyalty and love. At Evergreen, the day Sophia realized Elizabeth was gone, her heart sank. She rushed to the front desk, still in her nurse's scrubs, her badge swinging. "Where's Mrs. Thompson?" she asked urgently. The desk nurse, a middle-aged woman with cold eyes, replied without looking up, "Mrs. Thompson has been transferred. She's no longer under your care." Sophia clenched her fists, fighting back anger. "Transferred where? I need to know." But the response was a headshake and a vague, "It's being handled internally." Sophia turned away, feeling the floor crumble beneath her. This wasn't a random reassignment. Something was deeply wrong. That night in her cramped apartment with Lily and her mother, Sophia couldn't sleep. Her mother's coughing from the next room mingled with the rain outside. Sitting at the kitchen table, the dim lamp illuminated a drawing by Lily, a family of 3, though only 2 remained in reality. Sophia thought of Elizabeth, her stories told with shining eyes, the chamomile tea she brought to see her smile. "She doesn't deserve this," Sophia whispered, her hands tightening. She recalled the letter Elizabeth had given her, hidden in the room's drawer. That was when she decided to act. Sophia returned to Evergreen the next morning, heading to Elizabeth's room. The door was locked, but she persuaded Hana, a timid young aide, to let her check inside. In the drawer, she found Elizabeth's sealed letter. Opening it, she read trembling but powerful words. "Sophia, you are my light. You're not just a nurse, but family. I've changed my will so you and Lily can have a better future. Don't let them take it away." Tears streamed down Sophia's face, not for Elizabeth's generosity, but because she saw her as a daughter, something even her family hadn't done. The letter was a spark, igniting Sophia's resolve. She contacted Robert Hayes, Elizabeth's lawyer, demanding an immediate meeting. When he hesitated, Sophia sent Elizabeth a letter with a terse message. "She's in danger. You have to help." Robert called back within an hour, his voice grave. "Meet me this morning." In his small Seattle office, Sophia didn't mince words. She recounted Elizabeth's sudden disappearance, Michael's late-night visits, and Hannah's whispers about a psychiatric evaluation. But she didn't rely on words alone. Sophia had an unexpected weapon: a recording. 2 weeks earlier, during a night shift, Sophia accidentally recorded Michael talking with the facility's administrator near the nurses' station. While reaching for a pen, she hit the record button on her phone. In the clip, Michael's voice was clear and cold. "My mom's lonely and easy to manipulate. That nurse Sophia is conniving her. Once she's declared incompetent, the will reverts to how it should be." Sophia trembled while listening to it, but she knew it was the weapon she needed. She gave the recording to Robert, along with Hannah's reluctant confirmation of Michael's late-night meetings. Sophia didn't stop there. She reviewed Elizabeth's medical records, spotting discrepancies. Dates for the psychiatric evaluation didn't align. Notes claimed Elizabeth was non-compliant with medications never prescribed before. She gathered everything meticulously, like a detective. She and Robert filed an emergency court motion labeling Michael's actions as elder abuse. Meanwhile, Sophia knew Elizabeth was still locked in the psychiatric ward, isolated and unaware of her fight. Sophia held Lily close each night, whispering, "Mommy will bring Mrs. Elizabeth home, sweetheart." She wasn't just fighting for Elizabeth, but for herself, Lily, and the meaning of family, something she and Elizabeth were building together despite all the pain. In the small, dim room of Evergreen Nursing Home's psychiatric ward, Elizabeth Thompson endured long days of isolation where faint light and silence threatened to swallow her resolve. But her faith in Sophia Carter, the nurse who had become her true family, kept her strong. Unaware of Sophia's relentless fight outside, Elizabeth prepared for a final battle, a trial where she would reclaim her freedom and dignity. That day finally came, bringing a liberation she never thought possible. On the morning of the trial, Seattle was cloaked in thick fog, mirroring Elizabeth's heavy mood. They transported her in a van with tinted windows as if she were a secret to hide. Two orderlies sat up front, chatting about lunch, while Elizabeth sat in the back, hands clasped, holding onto her last shred of calm. She wore a pale blue sweater, her silver hair neatly combed, not to impress, but to remind herself she was still Elizabeth Thompson, a woman who had overcome countless pains to stand here today. The courthouse was a gray building with long halls and the scent of old wood. As Elizabeth was led into the courtroom, she felt the tension. In the front row, Sophia sat in a simple navy blouse, hands clenched, eyes filled with worry but burning with resolve. When their eyes met, Sophia nodded slightly, as if saying, "I promised," and was here. Elizabeth felt warmth spread, as if Sophia's strength flowed into her. Then she saw Michael at the defendant's table with a new lawyer in an expensive suit but with evasive eyes. He didn't look at her, his presence a dark reminder of all her suffering. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, signaled the start. Robert Hayes, Elizabeth's lawyer, stood, his voice clear and steady. He presented evidence like a master storyteller, the recording of Michael admitting his manipulation. Hana's testimony about secret meetings and falsified medical records used to confine Elizabeth. Michael's cold voice filled the room when the recording played. She's lonely, easy to manipulate. Once she's declared incompetent, the will reverts to how it should be. Murmurs spread, and Elizabeth saw Michael's shoulders stiffen, his face paling. It was her turn. Elizabeth stood, legs trembling but voice steady as stone. She looked directly at the judge, unwavering. "I may be old, but I'm not insane. I'm not delusional, and I don't need anyone deciding my life for me," she said, her voice echoing in the courtroom's silence. Turning to Michael, her gaze sharp as a blade, "I loved you, forgave you, gave my life for you. But when you let your father die, ignoring his call to avoid responsibility, you destroyed everything, and now you want to erase me too." The room fell silent. Sophia covered her mouth, tears streaming. Michael bowed his head, unable to meet her eyes. The judge called a recess. Upon returning, she fixed Michael with a stern look. "Mrs. Thompson is fully lucid and legally competent," she declared. "Mr. Walsh's guardianship petition is not only baseless but blatantly manipulative. You're lucky she hasn't pressed criminal charges." Her words were a hammer, shattering the walls Michael built to trap his mother. Elizabeth felt her chest lighten like a stone had been lifted from her heart. Outside the courtroom, Sophia hugged Elizabeth tightly, saying nothing, letting warmth speak. Elizabeth whispered, "Thank you, my daughter." Sophia smiled, eyes teary. They left the courthouse, ignoring waiting reporters. Elizabeth knew this victory wasn't just freedom from the psychiatric ward, but proof she could still write her own story. That week, Robert finalized the adoption. Sophia Carter became Elizabeth's legal daughter on paper and in her heart. Michael vanished entirely, no calls, no emails, just silence, a confession of defeat. Returning to Evergreen for her belongings, Elizabeth looked at the room once her prison with a strange detachment. It held no fear anymore. She had won, not with anger but with resilience and Sophia's love. Holding Henry's photo, she whispered, "We did it, my love." Elizabeth felt free for the first time in years, not just from walls, but from betrayal's pain. Yet she knew the final battle loomed, for Michael wouldn't surrender easily. After the storm of the trial, Elizabeth Thompson emerged from Evergreen Nursing Home's shadows with a heart healed by Sophia Carter's love and loyalty. Her victory over Michael didn't just restore her freedom, it sparked a new vitality, a chance to rewrite her life's final chapter. Standing before a small Seattle suburban house, Elizabeth was no longer the betrayed woman, but a mother, a grandmother, and a warrior who found a true family not bound by blood but by hearts that chose to stay. The new home was a modest wooden cottage with pale blue shutters and a white picket fence. Not as grand as her old house with Henry, it had a small garden of daisies and a creaking porch swing. Stepping out of Sophia's car, Elizabeth breathed in the scent of fresh-cut grass and damp soil. This wasn't a place she was forced into, but one she chose, a difference that lightened her heart. Lily, Sophia's 6-year-old daughter, ran out, her ponytail bouncing, shouting, "Grandma Elizabeth, I want the swing over there." Elizabeth laughed heartily, feeling for the first time in years like sunlight was spreading through her chest. Sophia helped carry her suitcase, her eyes brightening as she surveyed the new space. "This is our home," she said warmly. Elizabeth nodded, resting a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "You've given me a home, Sophia. Not just this house, but everything." They unpacked slowly, as if assembling pieces of a new life. Elizabeth placed Henry's photo on the mantel beside a drawing by Lily, 3 people holding hands under a sun. She smiled, thinking of Henry. "You'd love this place," she whispered, feeling as if he were somewhere smiling back. The following days brimmed with simple, precious moments. Elizabeth taught Lily to make peach cobbler flour, dusting the girl's hands, laughter filling the kitchen. For the first time in years, Sophia looked unburdened, as if an invisible weight had lifted. Together they planted flowers in the garden, digging soil and sowing sunflower seeds. The flowers, Henry said, always turned toward the light. Each afternoon they sat on the porch, sipping tea and listening to birdsong. Elizabeth felt a peace she thought she'd lost forever. Michael had vanished completely. A week after the trial, Elizabeth received a letter from his lawyer stating he had filed for bankruptcy. His reputation crumbled, post-trial investors pulled out, and Henry's real estate company was now ashes. Elizabeth read the letter, not smiling or gloating, just exhaling deeply. Justice, she realized, didn't need to be loud. Sometimes it came quietly, like Michael's self-destruction, without her lifting a finger. Yet deep down, a quiet pain lingered. Michael was once the boy she held through storms, her pride. Now a stranger she had to learn to let go. One evening, as the sunset gilded the garden, Elizabeth sat on the swing with Sophia. Lily ran around chasing flickering fireflies. "I thought I'd never get over Michael," Elizabeth said softly. "I loved him, but he chose his own path." Sophia took her hand, gentle but firm. "You don't have to forget him," she said. "Just stop letting him hurt you." Her words were a balm, helping Elizabeth see she could love the old Michael without clinging to the man he became. She began living for the present. Elizabeth helped Sophia complete an advanced nursing certification, dreaming of starting a home care service. They planned Lily's birthday with balloons, cupcakes, and glittering paper crowns. Each day, Elizabeth felt younger, not in body, but in spirit. She was no longer the woman caged in evergreen, but a mother and grandmother in a home filled with laughter. That night, Elizabeth dreamed of Henry. They danced in the living room with soft piano music, as in old times. Waking, she heard Lily's giggles from the next room and smelled Sophia's brewing coffee. She smiled, knowing this was home, not the walls or furniture, but the love and choice. Michael may have stolen her past, but Sophia and Lily gave her a future. With each sunflower seed sprouting in the garden, Elizabeth knew she had found the light, as Henry once said, and she would never let it fade.